Hello and welcome to the Playing Arts Podcast, where we put the spotlight on artists in our community. I'm your host, Andy Needham, and joining me this week is Jonathan Monaghan. Jonathan is an award-winning visual artist who works across a range of media, such as print, sculpture, and animation, to produce otherworldly objects and narratives where the lines between the virtual and real world are blurred. So I'm going to welcome to the show, Jonathan. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, it's great to have a chat with you. Thank you for taking the time. I want to learn a lot more about you because, there's this, you've been in NFTs for a long time, right? It goes back years, but we're going to get all into that for sure. But do you want to just share a bit more about your background? So just, we can get a sort of more rounded approach of who you are and yeah.
So I'm a visual artist and I work with digital technology to create my work. So I use 3D modeling and animation software to produce animations, but I also make prints and I also do sculpture using digital fabrication. And I exhibit this work in galleries and museums all over the world. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I grew up in New York originally. And I've been very involved in the NFT space, like a lot of digital artists have been, and it's been an exciting, exciting year in working with NFTs for me, or more than that now. And it's been also very interesting to see the space develop because, as you alluded to, I had began exploring a lot of these concepts with blockchain and all of that as early as 2013, and
Yeah. That's cool, man. Thank you for giving us a background there. I mean, let's talk a bit about NFTs in 2013. Ethereum didn't exist, but there was a scribe on Bitcoin. So, can you talk a bit about how that came about?
So, like I said, I'm an artist that works with digital animation, right? And as an artist, you sell work, right? A painter sells a painting, right? As a digital artist, we sell work as well. I mean, we sell digital art, and this has happened well before, the explosion of NFTs. So I've worked with galleries and I've sold work to art collectors and museums. And, this process has various established different standards. I mean, you can do certificates of authenticity, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, you're still selling a digital file, right? And when you take an art collector that, is probably paying a decent amount of money to collect an artwork, to collect an animation, that's weird, right? Spending a lot of money just to buy a digital file, something that could be copy and pasted and changed and deleted and whatever, right? It's different than a painting that is a physical object, right? And that, wherever that physical object goes is where that physical object is, right? Mm. So it's a little, so it's always been a little tricky. And, many collectors have been sort of savvy to this and have been okay with it. Museums and institutions have been okay with it. But still, there has always been this sort of uneasiness with acquiring digital artwork, and this has been an issue that myself and many other digital artists have encountered. And so let's go back to 2013, and I was in Berlin in a residency, and I met a curator while I was out there, and I had dinner with this curator and her husband, who was involved in the tech world. This developer was Trent McConney. He's a developer. And he was very interested in blockchain. He became very interested in the uses of the Bitcoin blockchain. This is 2013 when the Bitcoin was still fairly new and not a lot of people knew much about it. And so we started talking about this, and, we were talking about the idea of, can we use a blockchain as a way to record the ownership and provenance of a digital artwork. And this made a lot of sense because never before had there been this technology that was A, decentralized, and B, unable to change or be forged or whatever, that allowed me to associate a digital artwork with, this online sort of, we called it like a key at the time, like you have a key to the artwork. We didn't call them NFTs, or not, because the idea of a token really didn't exist back then. And so, anyways, so this started a conversation where he began developing these different layers on top of the Bitcoin blockchain and trying to create this way for artists to authenticate and track their work on the Bitcoin blockchain. Initially it was called Keydom, and then it was called Ascribe, and many artists were involved in this in the early stages. This was very experimental. All of the tech on top of this was very experimental, and none of this was as smooth and integrated as we're seeing today with the Ethereum blockchain and other modern blockchains. So, but yeah, so it was an interesting experience, but the concept is the same. It's a way to take a digital file and make it unique.
That's awesome, man. That must have been really kind of exciting having these early conversations and just, and it's sort of like thinking, yeah, we can finally solve this problem of, digital artists not getting paid for their work and also, and having like this sort of level of authenticity to it as well. So
yeah, exactly. Because patronage is very important to artists, and it's, we need artists in society, right? And there's not a whole lot of ways in which artists can get paid, can get remuneration for their work. And so we rely on collectors, we rely on museums and this and that. And when there is this sort of hesitancy, to acquire a digital artwork, because it's a computer file and they don't see the value in it as a computer file, that's a problem. And it's a problem for digital artists, and it's a problem just in general because, that work isn't being valued as much as it should be, And so this was an attempt to solve that problem back then. And it's been, over the past year, it's been great to see, this interest and this excitement of digital artists and celebration of digital artists that we're seeing. So,
yeah, it's really exploded, and it's a powerful thing. It's great. The piece that you recorded then as an NFT back then, is that the mothership piece?
Yeah, it was an animated film. So for most of my artistic career, I've been making animated films. These are video installations. They don't have like a specific start or stop, and they don't have a specific beginning or end. They are these sort of looping pieces that one would encounter in a gallery space or a museum, typically projected very large. And we're seeing a short clip of it here and some other stills. And so these works are created using 3D modeling and animation techniques. And oftentimes in my works with these video installations, I create these dreamlike scenes that have references to a variety of different things, from popular culture to ancient mythologies, to video games, and to finance, and to a whole range of different topics that I sort of combine together and put together in interesting ways. So it creates like this surreal story, this surreal imagery, and it's a way for, I think, an audience that's looking at this work to reflect on the world around them and to reflect on issues in society that we're facing today. So there's a lot of corporate logos.
Yeah, a lot to this. And you love these kind of like long camera moves and things like that. I want to just talk a bit about your kind of, I don't know. Actually, I want to talk about your process. And then I do probably want to come back and do a few other things as well. But let's just talk about this process then. Like, and talk about the camera moves in particular, I guess, because I've seen a few of your pieces where they are like long, continuous, trying not to cut the camera, well, you don't. So, there's like reasons for that. Do you want to just sort of describe that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of ways to tell a story, right? I mean, we have the tradition and the system of like a film with like cuts and edits and dialogue and all of that. And that's great. I mean, there's so many amazing artists and filmmakers doing narratives that way, right? For me, I was always interested in, I come from playing video games as a kid a lot,
Right.
and I was always interested in how you explore a world, a virtual world in a video game, and how a narrative and a story often gets revealed by how you're exploring that world. And so I wanted to sort of recreate that in a more cinematic way. And so in my video installations, there's this camera that is going through the different environments that I construct in this virtual space. And there's things happening, right? There's activities, there's animals, there's different characters that you encounter, but they're not encountered in this more traditional narrative, way. They're encountered, and then a narrative unfolds in terms of their actions and the imagery and their associations with them. So yeah, so some of my recent work, I mean, it's a 20-minute long piece, but there's no camera cuts or edits or whatever, and also the camera loops seamlessly, right? So we often end up where we start in terms of the 20 minutes. And so you can start watching these pieces at any moment, sort of jump into them at any moment. And, it's just, there's no specific start or stop. Like, you'll still understand the narrative and the story that I'm trying to portray here.
I think that's awesome. I think that's brilliant as well, actually, especially if you're thinking about this in an exhibition. You walk into a room and you see this this thing in front of you, and you're just like, yeah, they're cool. Wait, I can't walk away because it's still going. There hasn't been a change of scene yet. So, and it kind of pulls you in to the whole thing and makes you like observe it for 10, 15 minutes or whatever. And I mean, is that by design? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's great. I mean, one of the best things as an artist I see is when I get to go to, a presentation of my work, and I see people sitting in front of this stuff for, sometimes they're watching it as a loop, but then they're watching it like twice as a loop, like they're just stuck in front of it, like they're hypnotized by it. And I think that's intentional too. And also in terms of like the visual quality that I'm shooting for, right? These things are very polished. They have a very seductive visual quality to them. And that's something I'm shooting for in my work, because in a lot of what I'm doing is I'm utilizing a lot of the same like techniques and aesthetics of these very commercially oriented imagery, and a lot of the sheen of this has like, it feels like it's a commercial, or it feels like something very corporate, or something like an advertisement, or something like a car commercial, or whatever. And but I'm not trying to sell you anything, right? And so I think it's a opportunity for the audience to sort of reflect on those aesthetics, and to reflect on the idea of like desire in the digital age, right? And reflect on our consumer culture and how we're obsessed with things, and how we're obsessed with advertisements and selling and buying and all of that. And so it's an opportunity to reflect on that, is what I'm trying to present to my audience. So yeah, having that hypnotic quality, sucking the viewer into this world, is definitely something I'm shooting for.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And you mentioned video games, actually, is that something that kind of sparked your desire then for creating digital art, like through playing games and seeing maybe the game artwork and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what actually, I went to art school, but I went to school first because I wanted to make video games. I wanted to make animated films. I wanted to work with 3D. And so I taught myself 3D modeling and animation software when I was very young. And that is because I got into a lot of that through the gaming world. So doing things like making your own custom environments for various games, like Half-Life games and Counter-Strike, and a lot of these games that people encountered in their youth. I was very interested in the ability for people to, create content for them, to create custom maps and environments. And so it's got me into video game development, and then on to 3D modeling and animation. So, and I've just always felt very empowered by the tools that I use, because it allows you to produce images at, very low cost, right? I mean, I don't need a whole film crew and a film set and complicated camera equipment. I could develop all that in this virtual space. And so that was very powerful to me. It just gave me a voice that I never had before, and I just sort of ran away with it and started, making work.
So what are the tools that you're using then digital tools?
So I mostly use like 3D Studio Max, and that's it. I've just been doing that. I've just been doing that for many years, and using that software, I just got good at doing one thing, and but it's still challenging. As anybody that works with graphics knows, I've been working with this since I was 15 years old, so it's like 20 years now. I've been working with 3D Studio Max, and I still run into errors and problems, and so.
Yeah, I started on 3ds Max like a long time ago at uni, and it was I would probably have still used it if they made it on Mac, because I switched over to that, but it was great to begin with, and as basically, if you can learn the foundations of any of these, then it doesn't really matter what you're using, but they're all pretty much the same. And I want to talk about the render, what rendering you're using as well, because let's just go over to Instagram, I think, and just have a look.
Well, I bring that up. I was just, one of the things that drew me also into 3D graphics and into 3D modeling was its ability to create something that was like photorealistic, right? Its ability for these 3D softwares and these renderers to recreate, real materials and real lighting and real reflections. That sort of imitation just fascinated me. And again, it felt very empowering too, to be able to like create these images that look real but are artificial. And in terms of an artistic voice, that was great, because I was never particularly good, or was very frustrated with like drawing and painting. And I took painting courses, I took drawing courses, and I tried really hard at it. And it just felt so challenging to get my ideas, for me, because I just never developed those skills. It was just this frustrating, because I had all these ideas. I'm like, I want to render this in paint, I want to draw this, but I just didn't have the skills to do it the way I wanted to. But 3D allowed me to do that, right? I'm able to work with that software and just fine tune every tiny little setting, to achieve the exact, result that I want, so.
It's amazing how, these digital tools are kind of allow for like an explosion of creativity, and really just getting the ideas out of your head and onto the computer, and it's like people when they kind of like rapid prototyping and things like that, and just getting something down. It's just you need something like that. I understand that frustration of I used to draw all the time, and I kind of stopped, and lost a lot of skill from that, I think. And it frustrates me that I didn't continue, because it was a daily practice. And I wish, I still draw a bit, but like definitely like I got children, and I encourage them to draw, and just to,
Well, yeah. Well, drawing's great. I mean, you still got to do something. I mean, I still draw like out everything as like thumbnail sketches, but they're very crude, and it helps me with my ideas, but like I wouldn't show them as a final work, So, it gives you a control on image making, because that's what we're doing as artists. We're creating images. We're making images, moving or not. And if you just don't have those illustrative skills, you're not going to be able to create the images that you want to. And so that's what 3D has been amazing for me.
Definitely. And it allows you to really kind of play with the composition. It's a more fluid approach, I think. Just you can just sort of move things, or just move the camera even, and that gives you a whole different perspective. So let's come back to some of your pieces that you've got on Instagram, and there's a very kind of tactile kind of feel to the work that you're creating, because you've got some very nice contrasting materials, I think. Anyway, they've got this sort of smooth velvets and the kind of hard plastics and metals and stuff. And what's the, and we can talk about some of the themes of the kind of objects that you use, and the way that you sort of decorate a piece. But I want to know, because I think your golds look really gold, So there's a kind of there's something there I'd like to find out about. What's the secret to a
Yeah.
good gold?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think one of the themes that you'll see in all of my work is this contrast, right, between,
Mm,
or this discordance between organic and synthetic, between the man made and the natural, right, between the man made worlds and the natural worlds. And this is a contrast that I explore in all of my work. And so one of the ways I do that is often by exploring these surfaces that feel really soft and natural, and they're like velvets or leathers, and then they're contrasted with like these sharp gold Baroque details and ornaments and regalia, or they're contrasted with like ambiguous bits of technology and plastic, or consumer items. And so this, contrast, this juxtaposition, I think, again, offers an opportunity for reflection, or like our relationship to the natural world. This is a time when, our consumer culture has ecological consequences, right? And we have this sort of desire to, I think, become more natural. And the more and more we're on the computer too, this is a dehumanizing. It can be very dehumanizing, right? The more we interact through the computer, the more we rely on the computer and digital technology. And so a lot of these anxieties are what's expressed in my work. It's anxieties about the environment and our over reliance on technology. And so I do that through the simple, contrast of materials and imagery.
yeah, and so I guess there's a process then to your lighting setup and all of that, and because for me, like getting metals looking good is more about the environment that you're
Yeah,
in. So
absolutely. And I got a lot of inspiration too from like old jewelry, or like you go to museums and you look at the way ancient artifacts, or beautiful old jewels or Baroque regalia is like displayed and showed. That's been very influential. I did a whole series on the Fabergé egg. Where I sort of reinterpreted the Fabergé egg, which is this like iconic gold and jeweled thing. And I got to actually exhibit those works alongside original Fabergé eggs in a museum in Baltimore, the Walters Art Museum. So
wow,
they had original Fabergé eggs on display, and then you had a bunch of my large scale prints of my digital images that I created. And so this was this was a great exploration in like uh, looking at like the aesthetics of desire. Like how do you make something like shiny and expensive looking, luxurious looking? How do you explore that aesthetic, and what does that mean? What is it? So that's sort of where I'm approaching this. So yeah, so it's really looking closely at those aesthetics of like luxury and wealth, and exploring that. But yeah, from a technical standpoint, yeah, it's important to have good reflections on all your metal materials and all of that. But again, the software, just like every day, just gets better and better in terms of the ability to render these things and create this stuff. So
mm,
if your ideas are good, the technology is there for you to execute them. So.
yeah, absolutely. What renderer are you using in 3ds Max?
It's V-Ray. I use V-Ray. I just sort of was drawn to that. Used a lot in architectural visualization, and my work is very architectural. I've always been interested in architecture. If I wasn't an artist, I probably would be an architect.
Mm,
And so, architecture is a big component of my work. And so this working process just sort of lends itself to that. But yeah, I find it's just very good for, again, you have a lot of control, and that's what matters as an artist, really establishing that visual aesthetic and having all that kind of control over that. Could go either way, right? But once you have that control, it can really go into the direction that you want it to go into. So
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, a lot of magic can happen in the render. It's so powerful. The Yeah, I wanted to talk about a few pieces actually that because you mentioned architecture back then, and if we just look at we're just here and a few of these. So there's these are actually on I think Foundation, but
yeah, these are done for foundation. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. So I was,
go on, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, well, I grew up in New York, and so this series takes a lot of the iconic architecture from New York City, So this is the St. Regis Hotel in Midtown, and it was it's like this very it's from a certain age, right? The Gilded Age of New York, where there was a lot of like wealth, and there was a lot of this was like that iconic Gilded Age of New York in the over 100 years ago. And that's where all this architecture came from. And so I did a whole series of work where I really took that architecture. And, again, I'm thinking a lot about this disconnect in the digital age, right? So much, especially during the pandemic, so many of our interactions were through this virtual space, right? And we weren't going out. We couldn't touch people. We couldn't stand near people, right? There's all this like disconnect in the past couple of years, and so, I was thinking about tactileness and touch, right? And so I wanted to create this, strange illusion of tactiling and touch because, we don't think of like architecture as something, flexible and touchable, right? And so I wanted to take this idea that we think of that is, we all have a connection to, but that we don't think about, and make it like something that you hold in your hand, right? Something that you can touch and feel and sort of have this very intimate interaction with. And so that's where these works come from.
Yeah, there's something very, I love the look of it actually, and the fact that you've got all this like geometry that should be kind of hard, but it's all kind of bendy, and it's just like
So it's like a dream, it's like the surreal dream where something that you recognize and then something that you have an association with takes on a totally new form or meaning,
Yeah. The is incredibly detailed, the look of it. So because you mentioned you learn modeling and all that stuff, are you actually modeling these facades and stuff?
Yeah, actually those facades I all modeled because there wasn't any stock, because I wanted to choose these specific apartments because they're very specific. They were some of the first like luxury apartments that were built in New York, and they have a lot of just crazy history about them. And so there was very specific architecture that I was using in these works. And so, so I had there was no stock models of those. So I went ahead and did all the modeling myself based off of photos and stuff. So.
Oh, wow. How long did that process take?
Yeah, it took a while. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have any number of hours, but it definitely took a while. And I've done a number of different works with those, with that, with those buildings in it, different prints and sculptures and things like that. I've done 3D printing. I've taken out those flowy facades, and I've done very intricate 3D prints like that. So it's a long body of work.
Yeah, I mean that's you made your own stock, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, like many 3D artists, I mean, you have all these amazing resources out there, and yeah, sometimes it's just very useful. You just need a very generic couch. You can find a very generic couch, but I find myself sometimes wanting something very specific. Maybe it's like a specific reference or a specific, just meaning or something I'm drawn to, a specific imagery. So I find myself having to make a lot of things from scratch.
And it's great that you've got the skill to do so. I think definitely shows there. And it's I think that's great. I love that. I love that you made those. And I wanted to actually talk about some other things as well here, because actually we're going to come to that later. I'll keep it in mind. Let's just come back to a little bit about you, because I was watching something where, and it said the music was by you. Do you create your own music then? And how?
I will often do a lot of sound mixing myself, for my animations. So I'll do a lot of the sound work and sound mixing myself, but then sometimes will collaborate with musicians. So some of my pieces have music that's been composed by others. Other times it's sort of sound effects and atmospheric and other music that I'm putting together. But I'm definitely not a musician. That's definitely not where my skills are. So when I need really, well done music, I have to collaborate with others on that. So
yeah, for sure. So in terms of collaborations, would you do any sort of artistic collaborations? Have you?
Yeah, I mean, as an artist, I think we tend to work very individually, but I do
Mm.
collaborate with brands sometimes as well. I've done work, as an artist where I'm like, putting in my creative vision, but I'm working with a brand on the collaboration in some way. So I'm doing something very upcoming very soon, actually, where I'm working with a luxury home furniture company in Italy, Visionaire, and they do incredible craftsmanship. They create just incredible um, pieces of furniture, and they're just so well crafted. It's that Italian history of excellent craftsmanship, and so they were able to work with me, and they helped me produce a large marble sculpture that I've been trying to make for years. I've been trying to make this piece for years,
Mm.
and they using a combination of like expert artisans and also digital technology like digital fabrication. We produced a big marble sculpture that's going to be unveiled soon. So yeah, so these kinds of projects are really exciting to me.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about some of the sculpting projects then, because as you just said, they're exciting, and it's just another side to you that you have the kind of physical art as well as the digital. So, uh,
Yeah, I mean, from day one when I first started being an artist, the challenge was always like, okay, how do I get this work out of the computer? I have all this history with computers. It's where all my skill set is. But I always felt there was a need to like bring this stuff out of the computer, like, and that's through setting up these video installations in galleries and museums and prints, but also sculpture, because with 3D, then you also have digital fabrication technologies like 3D printing and CNC milling and laser cutting, and all of these ways in which you could bring all of this designs and data out into physical form. And so I've been experimenting with 3D printing and all of this for many years as well. And that's been very exciting.
yeah, I haven't really ever myself done any 3D printing, but it's very interesting what you can do with it all. I guess you have to have a pretty watertight mesh or whatever, and able to get the results get good and stuff. And I guess, does that change your process of how you're modeling things?
Yeah, I know. And when you're doing like these detailed architectures or things like that, it could be quite tricky. That's definitely a challenge many times, is doing all the technical side about this. But the results, I mean, could be amazing, because you could produce things that simply cannot be produced any other way. You can make a physical object, and there's just simply no way anybody could do that by hand. That's an incredible process. Excuse me.
Mm.
That's an incredible process. And so that's something I've been exploring as well with a lot of this work, is trying to, um, you know, think about why you're using this technology to make this film or this image. Why are you using this digital fabrication to make this sculpture or this form? And, what are some of the aspects that are unique to this process? And so, why is this process? Why are you using this process? And so, when you can do something that simply cannot be created any other way, that's where the power of this technology lies.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Are you in your studio right now, or do you have a specific place to go and be creative? And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of work from home, and then when I'm
yeah,
doing sculpture and I have to do the messy stuff, I go to a different spot. But yeah, I mean, I could show it to you. It's just a desk with a computer on it, and that's where I do everything. It's not much.
yeah. But it's
Yeah.
important to have a little space anyway, just to, even if it's a corner of a
Yeah.
room, to be creative. And yeah. And so are you mentioned sketchbook sketching down ideas and stuff, like, how else are you, is that your main primary method of
Yeah, I mean,
just
I have a whole bookshelf here full of these things, little moleskin notebooks,
Moleskine? Yeah.
and as soon as I just I fill them up with designs and ideas. This is like the thing I did on Make This Place, for instance. So yeah, so this is that thing you had up earlier. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, and everything starts off as really crude sketches with like some descriptions and words around them, and um, but I think also too, a lot of this process starts by looking at, I'm very influenced by historical artworks. We talked about the Fabergé egg and Baroque architecture and these historical architectures. So I'm very influenced by, historical architecture and historical artworks. And so I do a lot of research on this. I go to a lot of museums. I spend a lot of time in museums. I do a lot of time researching, going through art history textbooks and all of this. And so, yeah, so oftentimes I find myself, my process is oftentimes like reimagining these historical artworks or creating these homages to historical artworks. And that's where a lot of my process comes from.
Wow. What part of the process then is the part that you enjoy the most?
Definitely coming up with the ideas is the most fun part. Sometimes it's, you come up with this idea and then you're like, oh my God, now I have to spend 40 hours in 3D Studio Max coming up with this, and maybe I have to buy a new computer because I don't know if I'm going to render all this in time or whatever, So yeah, so it's definitely way more fun when you get into that creative space and the ideas are just flowing, and you're creating really strong ideas that you're really excited about. That's the best part. And then and probably I was going to say probably the second best part is when it's all done and you present the work and you could like relax a little bit, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say then, so, in that stage of just getting the ideas down and stuff, are you not thinking like, how am I actually going to make this? You're actually just pouring it all out.
Avoid that because I think could be a very creatively, that could like nullify a lot of your creativity if you're thinking too technical and you're thinking too practically, during that creative stage. It's really like you have to like switch on and off different parts of your brain almost when you're going through this process, and you have to sort of switch on that like creative flow, right? You have to let that stuff flow, and you can't like be putting these obstacles in front of it, right? Unless initially, but there's a lot of things in my sketchbook that, I would love to make, but I just can't make it. It's either just don't have the time or the money or whatever, so there's a lot of projects that I haven't been able to achieve yet. So.
Yeah.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day, like, you said this sculpture that is being finally created has taken years. So
yeah,
it can happen. That's so cool. Let's talk about exhibitions actually, because you've exhibited all over the world. And yeah, what were some of the most memorable exhibitions?
Yeah, well, like I said, but before, working with the Fabergé eggs was really cool. Being able to exhibit work alongside these priceless works of art was amazing. We've also done similar projects to that, and I actually have one upcoming as well that I'm really excited about. It's at called the Phillips Collection in Washington D.C. It was actually America's first modern art museum, and they display Van Gogh and a lot of impressionist work and a lot of modern artwork, and they are giving me an exhibition in the fall where I am creating a new work of art that is inspired by one of the historical artworks in their collection. And so I chose this Giorgio di Chirico painting. He's a surrealist painter, from the 1920s and 30s. And so I am inspired by that painting. I'm creating an animated video installation inspired by that painting. So I get to exhibit it in the museum alongside the original painting. So that's really exciting.
That's cool.
So yeah, anytime you get to, interact with the historical museum collection, or anytime you get to have a large audience, those are amazing opportunities. Perhaps one of my most, proudest moments in my career was a few years ago when I exhibited a video at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, which is it's France's largest contemporary art museum. And that was really cool. But they also chose images of my video. It was my video Disco Beast that was exhibited of a unicorn. And they chose like my images for, like the outside poster. And, there's posters all around the city of Paris with my image on it. That was amazing. So that was cool. Really special to see that.
Amazing.
When you go to a city and you walk around the city and you see your artwork all over the place, that's really cool.
Yes. Yeah. I hope you took plenty of photos. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I have to ask, COVID must have affected some of your planned exhibitions then?
Yeah, I was actually in St. Petersburg, Russia, putting together the largest solo exhibition of my career when COVID really hit and they started closing down flights from Europe and all that stuff. And all my flights were canceled. I was almost stranded in Russia for COVID, and I got on one of the last flights. That was very crazy experience. But no, it was a very challenging time for myself and a lot of other artists because there was a lot of things that were planned and then were delayed and then they were delayed again and pushed
Mm.
back and a lot of uncertainty. It was really a really big challenge for myself. And I think many other artists. And I just read an article or something today where it was like, it shrunk by almost half. The art market and the art industry just, it shrunk significantly more than any other, industry during this time.
Mm.
And so, yeah, it was very challenging. But this is, I think, part of my theory. Part of my theory for why NFTs exploded so much was that you had all this creative energy, and it wasn't just visual arts, but music obviously was totally hurt by this with performances and events
Mm.
and all that. And so fashion too and sports and all of these other areas that were so hit by this, all this creative energy just went into the NFT space. And that's one of my theories for, partially why there was such this explosion of creative energy over the past year.
I tend to agree there. I think I was going to
Yeah.
say, that was good that that you had this other outlet, I guess, to you know uh, to explore and
Yeah.
come back to. I guess. I mean, because I was going to say, like 2013, a long time ago since that Bitcoin experiment, and then were you doing NFTs in when did you pick it up again, or did you
Well,
never?
so I got contacted by this was I guess October of 2020 or
Yeah.
September of 2020 when a lot of places like Foundation and Nifty Gateway were contacting me and were just like, we want to put your artworks up on NFTs, and the term NFT, I don't think I was quite familiar with it even at that time, even though I was familiar with this concept, and so I looked into it and I'm like, I already sort of did this, and frankly, like nobody cared. When I was doing this stuff, and many other artists were doing this stuff, back in 2013, 2014, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody understood this or really cared about it back then.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I definitely appreciate a lot of the artists that were starting to do things on these platforms, and like you said, there was not a whole lot of other creative outlets. So I started doing works on Foundation, and then it just started taking off little by little, and and then we had that explosion, which
Mm.
was about a year ago exactly. So
Yeah, exactly. So you're actually number 68 on Foundation. You can see there.
yeah,
So
and they
close.
actually, yeah, exactly, yeah, and they actually had another version of their first version was a little different too. Foundation has been actually Foundation second version of it. Um, Yeah, so this was great. I was hesitant too because I'm like, what is this stuff? And it was again, like I said, I worked with this previously, and I, was a little hesitant because I'm just like, I'm not sure if frankly, I was totally wrong because I didn't think anything was going to happen with this. And so when they first, invited me onto this, I'm like, nobody's going to care about this stuff, but I was wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's funny that you were sort of skeptical about it, having sort of done it a while ago, and then
Right.
yeah. But I mean, what convinced you then? Because you could have just said, no, I'm not going to do this.
Right. Well, what convinced me was I think there was really good people associated with Foundation. I knew some of the people that were organizing the artists and stuff. There was a lot of other good artists that were on there and on that space. But I also just felt like it was time to maybe get a new audience. I mean, you have to adapt. If your traditional audience is you're unable to reach them, as an artist, you still need to speak your voice, and so you have to find these new avenues for doing that. And so navigating that was definitely a part of this. And yeah, it's just been great. There's just been so many communities that I've been interacting with, so many different projects, so many new ways of working. Working on this playing arts project, for instance, was I never thought I'd be designing a playing card before, much less one that was connected with NFTs and crypto. But that was just an amazing project, and so things like this started to emerge, and it just became a whole new creative outlet and meeting whole new creative people. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, let's yeah, I do want to just, before we talk about the card, actually, I just want to mention, because you're on Maker's Place as well, and people can find you over here at Makers. There's the kind of collection that you put out there. Let me just see. Here we go. So this, do you want to talk us through this drop that you had on Makers?
Yeah. So we're going to do a few more drops. So we had this one drop of these works, and a lot of what I do in my work is like reimagine these ancient mythological stories or ancient mythologies and myths. And so here we have the zodiac, and these ancient symbols associated with the zodiac signs. I'm a Virgo, but here we're seeing, Taurus and Scorpio. And, there's a lot of like animal associations, color associations that have traditionally been associated with these different zodiac signs. And so I sort of reinterpreted all of this information into these new creatures that are composed of ambiguous computer parts and luxury fabrics and gold. And so there are it's a sort of a zodiac sign for the digital age,
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, you always have like these sort of CCTV cameras for the eyes and stuff like that. And
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's these mythological stories for the digital age.
Got it. Yeah, let's jump over and talk about your card for a bit, and then we can come back to. Oh, actually, before we do that, I mean, yeah, because you were talking about different audiences. So, are you seeing? You're going to use Maker's Place to connect with a different audience as opposed to Foundation, as opposed to whatever comes next?
Well, I think, obviously these marketplaces are marketplaces, right? So people are hoping, to sell. So I think it's a great way to find patronage and find support for the artist, and I don't think people really understand just how meaningful that is when somebody's willing to, purchase your artwork, and to give you that kind of support, excuse me, that's really meaningful as an artist. And that's what keeps us making art, because especially if you're not, doing work with some sort of commercial intent or something like that, I mean, there's just no way for artists to support themselves. And so we really rely on art collectors and patrons, and obviously there's also, institutions and museums, but having that patronage is really valuable. And so these marketplaces are a great way to find new patronage, find new art collectors. And I think it's really, I don't think it's exaggerating to say that this is like a whole, renaissance for artists. You go back to the Renaissance and you look at the history there. This was when you had all of this new patronage in the arts, and you had all these people who were competing for artists, who were, funding the arts, who were commissioning pieces. And what you had was this massively influential, explosion of incredible artworks, for hundreds of years, and so that was, I think it's similar in a way to what's happening now. We're seeing a whole bunch of new people who weren't patrons of the arts before now becoming patrons of the arts. And that's amazing. That's, that's great. That's definitely one of the benefits of this, of this space we're in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a few other things there, but I want to come back to that. I want to definitely talk about your card, and let's have a look at it. Here we go. So 5 of Hearts. And this has got, this features like your iconic imagery, the Baroque regalia. And yeah, I guess like how did this idea, how did this concept come to you?
Well, I wanted to, first of all, like I played poker a lot, growing up, and I've always been interested in, in poker, and also magic too. We associate cards with magic too, not just gambling, but no, I think I wanted to create like a, we always talk about NFTs and Bitcoin. There's a lot of talk about, finance and all of this involved in this, and wealth, right, and power. And so I wanted to create like this Baroque ATM. So what would like an ATM machine look like in the court of like Louis the 17th, in France or something, Louis the 15th in France or something like
Mm.
that, or what's like a crazy Baroque ATM going to look like. And so this is sort of what I came up for that, and it's also a little sci-fi, right? It's like kind of hovering over this energy. So it's so it's a playful piece, simple piece, but I think it was very fun to make this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you aware of Playing Arts before joining?
No, not really. I mean, they reached out and it seemed like a really cool project. And, a lot of the artists that were associated with it I really respected and was really cool. I definitely wanted to be a part of that group of artists, so, and, again, I never designed a playing card before, so this was pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to come back to a piece that I noticed on Instagram, and I'm going to find it. Yeah, because I wanted to get your thoughts on. I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on PFPs actually. So, what do you think
I don't
about?
have too many thoughts on it. Yeah, yeah. I'm, I guess like I said, I've been exploring this concept, right? And I was interested in it as a way, again, of NFTs as a way to like um, secure my digital artwork and make it collectible and make it unique. And the ways in which people are being so creative with this technology and this whole new vision for the way we interact digitally with NFTs, I'm still learning about, and it's been incredible to see the like just the genius ways in which people are using this concept of like a unique digital asset to do all kinds of amazing things. It's definitely not going away. I mean, this is a very powerful way, to interact in the future going forward, and that has implications for gaming, and it has like legal implications, in terms of like like literal contracts and all kinds of ownership. I have friends in have like a real estate title lawyer who's like all involved and interested in NFTs, and like they're thinking about ways in which this is going to transform all kinds of aspects of. And I think what's going to happen is like we're going to be playing games, we're going to be doing this and that, and NFTs and blockchain are going to be involved, and we're not even going to have any idea, that what we're doing is connected to the blockchain and connected to all this stuff, and I'm just blown away by the creativity of all these people that are involved in the space and the way they're thinking about the future.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I found this work on Insta, and because this is what I was asking you about PF pieces and the profile pictures
Yeah.
and stuff. And I just thought like if ever you've got a few, a concept here, like and I think people should definitely come and check this out because there's so much detail. As you've got to get into Jonathan's works like and look closely because detail in the materials. There's like little bits and bobs to find out. Look at all this, and I just thought, yeah, you've got like some pretty interesting like imagery here. That yeah, I wonder how that would look as a collection of like not 10,000 or
Yeah.
I don't know, but something.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, these are prints actually, but yeah, actually, I was very interested in that history of portraiture,
Mm,
and you know, what's fascinating, you're going back to like the Baroque and the connections between the Baroque and like the NFT space. Oftentimes those portraits were portraits of power. Somebody would commission a painter of high regard to paint their portrait, but only like the most powerful and influential people could do that.
mm,
And the portraits were made to be, make the person look powerful, right? And so I was in this series of work, I was riffing off a lot of those aesthetics, the way in which power is presented. And I think that's also quite interesting too, how, profile pictures and all of this are being used to also, present that exclusivity and that status and that, that wealth, right? And so, I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
just thought,
it's a
man,
whole art history paper.
yeah. There's a lot there anyway. Yeah, I was going to say, because you were talking about audiences and stuff, and I think when we've spoken before, I'd mentioned about, a lot of people are doing custom contracts and things like that. And you made an interesting, point about, the kind of like, I think it was something about interfacing, with a marketplace versus, a custom contract. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of pick that up really, and just sort of pick that up with you, just to see what you thought about what the difference is really between, people that are kind of really more focused on and very focused on like now putting out their own work on their own contract versus, going to a more established place like, Maker's Place, Foundation, whatever, potentially taking more of a cut, on it, but, maybe having a wider audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a dynamic for sure that, I'm seeing, and for sure, and I think many other artists are seeing. And there's when you, I think there's a great value in NFTs as a way to preserve the work, as a way again to make it unique, as a way to track the provenance. It's like, you could use NFTs in this like archival way, right? In this way to, list, and you can sort of use it as like a database of your work, right? Every work you create is like an NFT, and then you have this archive of your work and track the provenance and the creation date and all of this. So there's a lot of ways in which you can use NFTs as a tool, in that artistic practice. And then there's also the marketplaces, right? And yeah, there's sort of two different things. And I mean, they're similar, but they're also sort of separate, in my opinion, because with these marketplaces, I mean, it's more about finding an audience and finding that patronage. But no, I think there's many artists that maybe are interested in those like market dynamics or involving themselves in that, but they can still utilize a lot of the technology of NFTs in ways that are really beneficial. Utilize them as a tool, for their work, for their artistic practice. And you could also do something like, maybe using blockchains or different processes that don't have high gas fees, and or maybe more proof of stake blockchains. So to do that and you don't have to involve yourself in places necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, and have you considered any other blockchains for putting your work out
Yeah,
there?
we did a bunch of work on Tezos, and that was great. And so yeah, I mean, there's different, where I'm doing stuff on layer 2, et cetera, working on all kinds of different things. We're also working with taking physical artworks, like 3D prints, and then minting them as what we call an NFT plus. So I've been working with a company called 4Art Technologies that has this process where we can take physical artworks, connect them with a digital image or an animation, and then they go together in what we call an NFT plus, and then that is an asset that then could be minted on various different blockchains. And so yeah, so that's been great to explore that as well.
That's really cool. I think that, idea that, a lot of people struggled with early on is like, that were kind of coming into and didn't get NFTs and stuff. Well, it's because there's not something physical, associated with it. And, this sounds quite interesting that you're pairing something, physical that you've created with, attaching it to the token kind of thing. So
yeah, because part of and again, NFT, it's like tracking ownership, right? And it's a way to authenticate something. And so if I have a 3D print, yeah, I mean, maybe somebody could grab that file, reprint it themselves, but then it's not the original artwork, right? So there's oftentimes this need to even have this extra layer of authenticity and protection on physical artworks. And so NFTs are a potential solution to that, and a potential way to, just make that process more developed.
Yeah. There's a couple more things that we can talk about before we wrap it up. But there was a thing that you did on with crypto.com for their launch. This is the drop. You worked. Do you want to just sort of explain it probably better than me?
So again, one of the great things we saw was this confluence of music, fashion, sports, or whatever, all coming together in the NFT space. And so I got reached out to by some people in the music world who were working with this singer, Nathan Evans. He's a Scottish singer who went viral on TikTok. And this was related to the pandemic because he got famous just singing these sea shanties at home, on TikTok, and got famous doing this. And this was a very fascinating story. He started off as a postman, and you could see like this is like an homage to his humble origins. And so so he just got famous singing these songs, and it became a whole thing. And so this was, I think, a great collaboration, just working with a musician, and also we have both of our work sort of look at the future by looking towards the past, and so his reinterpretation of these historic sea shanties from the 18th century or whatever, that really resonated with me as an artist who's often reinterpreting these historical references in artwork. So,
yeah, very cool. I have checked him out since learning a bit about him, and quite catchy actually, quite catchy stuff. So
it's just nice. It's just nice to to explore different things, and to explore different collaborations. So
yeah, absolutely. So there's something you've got coming up, and we can jump over to that now. This is just something you sent me recently.
So this is the marble sculpture. So I'm getting to make this marble sculpture in physical form, thanks to this collaboration with this Italian furniture brand, Visionaire. And they, they're just a great design brand. And so they helped me fabricate this sculpture in physical form, and it'll be unveiled soon. But as a sort of a celebration of this, I did these series of vignettes where I placed this sculpture in these different Baroque environments. And so these are actually still some animations that'll be released soon. And so, there's like some simple movements in here, and that these will all be shown on Foundation. And so, so this was a sculpture that I've been wanting to make for a long time. It takes the very famous and iconic Apollo Belvedere sculpture. It's a very famous sculpture of Apollo, the Greek god. And it reinterprets it by putting this pillow, sort of tufted skin all over this surface of the Apollo sculpture, and it creates a really sort of alien, almost otherworldly quality to it. And then there's actually 3D printed gold buttons that will go fit into the marble sculpture. So it's a combination of different digital fabrication techniques to create this work. So it'll be on display in Milan in June, the sculpture. And it's a very exciting project. So it's again, very multidimensional. So we're doing animations, it's doing physical, it's doing several different mediums with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. That kind of sort of pillow that you associate with being like a kind of soft, cozy comfort thing. But then it's actually this really hard, hard to the touch kind of thing. And it's like this whole...
Yeah, it's like this contrast, and again, all the work's about these different juxtapositions and these unexpected contrasts that I create in this work. So this, difference between the soft and the hard, but also like the ancient and futuristic, right? So it's like all these different contrasts go into the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, so good to chat. I think I've run out of questions for now. I think is there anything I guess we could just sort of say how people can connect with you best, and that. So
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very, people feel free to reach out. I love to chat with other artists or creatives or whatever. So hit me up. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. Very, accessible. Love to chat with people. So
yeah, awesome. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, before we go, I'll thank the Playing Arts community for supporting the project. And yeah, I'll be distributing a POAP for the listeners. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Jonathan. This has been just great, like really like learning more about you and these amazing artworks that you create. I love the level of detail in your work, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing this new drop when it comes out on Foundation. So best of luck with that. And yeah, so thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, man. We'll see you all in another episode of the Playing Arts Podcast.